Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a homeowner association fined me $41,500 for plowing the road in front of my house during a snowstorm. I then got the HOA shut down. Here is what happened. Subscribe to Ripe on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. I'm going to start by saying I live in a small town that gets a lot of snow over the winter, making already narrow and dangerous rural roads damn near impossible to get through, and that is if you're lucky. I thought I was being a good Samaritan, a good neighbor, by plowing some of the snow away, although most of it was on my own land, just so my wife and I could get our cars out without slipping into a ditch or tree. We went to a public meeting last winter to ask if they could send someone to deal with the snow quickly piling up, and were met dismissively with suggestions to rent a snowmobile during the harder months or walk if absolutely necessary. I saw no reason to go to such extremes when I knew I could manage it by myself. It's not like we could afford to stay at home over the winter, and our jobs were not so close that we had the luxury of walking to them from way out here in the sticks. The work was hard and the snow was heavy, but I managed to keep at least one portion of the driveway and roads cleared to allow us to reach the nearby town and rest of the outside world. One day, after spending hours clearing the drive, I left with the car to pick up my son from town, finding the road ahead blocked by someone working for the HOA. I stopped to ask what was going on, and they said they were told to install a road bump on our land. It made it hard to access my house now by road and damn near impossible for my son with his disability. As soon as I came back, I spent the evening digging the thing back up. The next morning, I called up a representative of the HOA to give them a piece of my mind, and what followed 2 weeks later was a letter outlining that this policy would stay and cars found on closed roads would be subject to further fines. No apology was given for the trouble or stress the incident caused our family. With no clear desire or interest in meeting us halfway or accommodating to our family's needs, I decided to keep clearing the high tides of snow from the road, and we continued to use the road in our daily lives, unaware of what was coming next. Despite our protests, the HOA continued to insist on the use of snowmobiles for transport in favor of our usual vehicles in the winter months, firmly stating that the roads should remain snowed over even on private property, listing off various reasons which I did not really care to believe. I just thought they were doing it because they were stubborn and did not like us much after the commotion we had tried to raise earlier. It was early February when the snow began to melt, but that's not where our problems stopped. A thick envelope arrived hand-delivered from an express courier, quickly ripping it open to reveal a stack of bills and a strongly worded letter that spanned 2 whole pages. In summary, the HOA had been recording the complaints we had made and cited us with a number of violations with a hefty fine to back it up, which they assured us was legally binding. The violations ranged from weird to ridiculous: harassment of HOA personnel, plowing roads without authorization, and the use of closed roads without permit. From day one, I spent long hours on calls to their representatives to try and get the fines removed, or at least reduced to what seemed like an unfair rule on their part. Seeing as they somehow felt they had the sole rights to the roads to and from my house, able to block me in or out of it at their leisure. They did not take kindly to this criticism, however, and despite negotiations starting calm, their inadequacies and inability to cooperate or show the slightest hints of sympathy or empathy made me mad, as if they did not understand what the whole deal was. When I refused to meet their demands, I was approached by police officers the next evening, telling me that the fines were legal and had to be paid soon. With little options left to me, I called a lawyer and decided to file charges against the HOA, hoping that a jury would understand my situation and overrule them. Days passed into weeks as the trial continued. The fees were becoming too much, but still a fraction of what had been demanded of me. And then, on that final and fated day, I found myself fall deeply into disappointment and despair. The HOA had hired a team of expert lawyers and hounded us through most of the trial. A classic David and Goliath scenario, except this time Goliath won. The jury and judge agreed to side with the HOA, and I was ordered to pay total fees of $41,500 or face time in jail. I had no fight left to give at that point and fell into a long depression. A second mortgage on the house got me the money for the fees, and I tried not to do anything to upset them further, keeping my car off the road for the while. My son was homeschooled, unable to walk to catch a bus, and my wife was put on leave until it was resolved. I even contemplated quitting my job now unable to leave my house. My wife, however, was not done with the fight. She insisted that it was too soon to just roll over and that we had suffered enough. Although I did not have much hope at the time, we took our story public and soon found ourselves overwhelmed with support from other homeowners, both from the local towns and other states with their own troubles with local housing authority. Through what we can only call a miracle, the debt we had ended up in was paid off after a surge of generous donations that only brought more attention to our cause. Once it was picked up by the news, it had gone completely viral, with many angry voices demanding for a retrial. As the first snow of a new winter began, the HOA was found guilty of misconduct and abuse of power, and the judge ordered it to be disbanded after clearing us of all charges. I went back to plowing my own roads again, and I could not be happier. We won. And by the way, Ripe Stars, I'm not sure if you noticed, but recently I've gotten a new microphone. And I am still fiddling with the settings and stuff, so maybe the sound is a little bit weird for the next few episodes. It's a much more professional microphone, so I would appreciate your feedback. The next one was posted by user Cruel1969 on our own subreddit, and it is titled I Don't Work Here Lady or The Anti-Karen. This story is very much an I Don't Work Here Lady story, but it involves a delightful older lady who was not even a little bit rude. I was flying home to Portland from Indianapolis via Las Vegas. Due to transportation limits, my trip began at 4 AM on a bus from Anderson, Indiana to Indianapolis, and then waiting for 10 hours for my flight, because the afternoon bus arrived at the airport just 30 minutes before my flight left. After landing in Vegas, I had a 4-hour layover before my flight home to Portland, which would arrive at 12 AM. That is traveling from 4 AM ET to 12 AM PT, so by the time my flight was boarding in Vegas, I was already very tired. As an amputee, I am entitled to early boarding, and on this day, as I waited at the gate agent station, an older woman who looked like she was Indian was talking to the gate agent. The agent was trying to explain that someone would be there soon to help her board, but the woman did not speak English, so she did not understand. As we were going to the same place, I offered to help her. The gate agent seemed relieved to have the woman helped, so I offered my arm and she took it. We slowly tottered down the jetway and onto the plane. I put her in her seat and then I went to mine. On the flight, I asked the flight attendant if the old lady and I could deplane first before the other passengers stood up, and she agreed. We got to Portland and I found a wheelchair sitting waiting for us just off the airplane. There are not many ways to leave the airport, and the woman was chattering happily as I pushed her along, so I figured we were going where she wanted to go. We found her son and there was a happy reunion, but as I walked away she got excited about something. Her son told me that his mother wanted to thank me, but she wondered why I had flown to Portland just to help her. I realized she thought I worked for the airline and she was confused why I had helped her if I was just another random passenger. I explained I had just done for her what I would want someone to do for me if my mother was in her position. The woman hugged me and said something her son translated as, "Tell your mother she did a good job," or something like that. The woman was very touched that I would help her, but it was true. I think she had run into some racism or maybe some xenophobia, fear of foreigners, which just made me sad to think about. And yeah guys, recently I've actually seen quite a few of these more positive I don't work here lady stories. I guess they could also simply be called I'm a good human being and I help here stories. The next one was posted by user Marsha O. It is titled, "Won't Pay Me My Vacation Pay and Severance Pay After You Agreed?" The cast is me, OB for owner/boss, APL for accounts payable lady, CW coworker, and ES employment service. In 1996, I, 48 female, worked for a small publisher of trade magazines. I had been working there for over 6 years. I was the office manager, plus doing any other job that needed to be done, as I knew how to do all the other jobs. The OB, 56 male, decides to relocate the company approximately 300 miles away. In meeting with me, CW, 40 female, and one other employee, OB tells us he is moving the company on such and such date, tells other employees she can collect unemployment after that date. That employee then leaves and then asks if I would like to move and keep my job. I am late 40s, married, 2 children, still in private school. I tell him thank you, but I cannot, as husband's job is not movable. CW was told she would be staying after the move until all completed at new location, and then her position would be moved. She declined to move and so would collect unemployment after the position moved, which was approximately 2 months. OB then tells me I will get my last paycheck 1 week after move date, along with 1 week severance and accrued vacation pay. Now, mind you, I was on an hourly rate as I had my children in a private school. I was their transportation. I would come back to the office in the evening and weekends and work and would clock in and out every time I was there. We had made an agreement, verbal, that if I worked over 40 hours in a week, I would get that time off next pay period, or whenever I was under 40 hours, my extra hours would be added to make the standard 40-hour week. Because of this, I kept copies of my time cards. This was to verify how many hours I had extra towards the next week. At times, I had a lot of hours accumulated as he sponsored yearly awards in the industry and had a formal dinner to go with awards of which I was completely in charge of. He did not want to pay overtime. I was underpaid, $10 per hour, and I knew it, but it was very close to home and the hours worked for me as I could leave if I needed to for my children. Side note, all employees originally worked directly for the company. Approximately 2 years before he moved, OB decided to have a personal company ES lease out to him. He would just pay them a check each pay period for salaries plus their service fee and not have to do all the employment paperwork. So fast forward to week after move. Now mind you, only half of business moved at this time, CW and APL still local. I go to pick up my checks from APL, only 1 check there, last paycheck, with OB not at old location this day. I was told I would have to speak to OB about other checks, severance and vacation. The following week I go in, OB is there and says not giving severance and ES does not pay vacation out unless full year's worth accrued. And also that I should call them. I call ES and was told no vacation pay and no severance as he would not pay them the severance charge and they did not pay the vacation. I told them I was promised this and had witnesses, CW, and was given runaround and told to get back to OB. Tried to reach OB for another 2 weeks. During this time, because of our agreement of no overtime, I kept copies of all my time cards, especially since report of hours went to the ES. ES never saw time cards, they were only given hours on a computer sheet. So I figured up all my overtime that I was never paid for. It wound up being over 4 times the amount OB was refusing to pay. I work up all figures, call ES and explained the verbal agreement. They were of course upset as that is illegal. They request if I can make copies for them. I make copies and go to their offices and show the proof. ES wants to keep the copies I took. I agree. They want to go back to see the original time cards. When OB gets news of this, OB calls me. He was furious. I told him I honor my agreements, you broke yours, so I am breaking mine. During this time, CW calls me carefully and lets me know he is boiling. OB is cussing about me and wondering how I could have made all those determinations of how much I was owed. OB did not know that I was making copies of my time cards. This is not the first time he tried to mess people out of money once they left the company. Most employees were on commission and he always, when he let them go, tried to cheat them out of their last commissions. I was the only second person who ever tried to get all their money back. The first one who succeeded had a husband and father that were attorneys. Remember this person. 3 weeks later, I got all my money from ES and OB had to pay them for all the overtime and a fine according to CW. And they say he could be liable for some other charges as he broke their contract. CW informed me as OB was on speaker with ES in APL's office. Then after that call, OB started another cussfest. That was sweet. That was good revenge. Now for the best though, 1 year to the day, per her contract, the other employee whose husband and father were attorneys, mentioned above, I joined with another publisher and we opened a competitive magazine and slowly drummed him out of business. That was epic. And by the way, Ripe Stars, I forgot to mention, this story was posted in the comments of a video that I posted recently, and while I do appreciate the longer stories in the comments, it would be very much appreciated if you could instead send them to my business email, which is ripereddit@gmail.com. Thank you so much. The next one is titled, Should Not Have Reported Me. Backstory, I need to include some more info for this to make sense. Several years ago, I purchased a home in a coastal paradise in a hot, humid and mosquito-infested Florida. The backyard was 2/3 fenced and included a tin shed that served more as a palmetto bug sanctuary than a functioning storage facility. My next-door neighbor, a decrepit old man, henceforth called X, also had a 2/3 fenced yard and his swimming pool faced my shed. One weekend, I felt inspired to tear down the old shed and began stripping the structure down. Due to the age of the shed, the bolts holding everything together were rusted through and impossible to remove without additional tools, aka tin snips. I apologized to X but informed him I would finish the work the following weekend as I work full-time during weekdays. By Tuesday, X had contacted the county inspector who was a friend of his and lied, stating I had left the shed in disrepair for months, which violates our local ordinances. The inspector informed me I needed to remove the structure immediately or I would be subjected to fines. I responded that X lied about the duration the shed was partially disassembled and also that I would have everything cleared out by the weekend as I had already informed X about 2 days prior. Now onto the revenge. I was a newish homeowner. I had not read up on all the ordinances in my county. After reviewing the list, I took special note of the lawn care rules which state grass exceeding 12 inches on a majority of the property is a violation. Yada yada yada. And since a majority is not defined, it's a de facto 50.1% of the property. So to this day, I let the lawn and weeds overgrow in the section that is only visible to him from his pool, while the remainder of my lawn remains pristine. This has been my routine for the past 4 years and will continue until the day he moves or is 6 feet under, whichever occurs first. Final note, he is on a retiree's SS budget, so I knew he could not afford to erect a fence between us. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I'm curious, if you ever had a neighbor like this, what would you have done? Would you have done the same as the OP? Let us know in the comments. The next one is titled, Addict Petty Revenge. Last year during the pandemic, the area I live in became a bit of a ghost town. I am in a college town, so because of distance learning, nobody wanted to live here. Makes sense, why pay rent when you don't even actually need to be at the school? My landlord was having trouble filling up these units and finally he finds this odd group of people to take over one of the units. So these new tenants move in and while one was pretty nice and chill, we will call him Terry, the other tenants Hurley and Olga are just the absolute worst. They are always high out of their minds on heroin, their guests have slashed my housemate's tires, thrown my potted plants around and stolen some of my property. We have never done anything to provoke this, I promise. We share our gardening supplies with Terry, we occasionally bake and grill for each other. It is just Hurley and Olga who have complete disregard for basic human decency. They don't even apologize when they do these things on their binges. They just say sorry and say they cannot control what their guests do sometimes. We have called the cops multiple times, they take a report, say no charges will be pressed because the damage does not hit the legal amount necessary for it to be a felony. And then they leave. The landlord won't evict them either. Anyways, the other night they started blasting country music from about 8 PM until 6 AM the next morning. I finally go over and she tells me again she cannot control what her guests do. Part 1 is I am calling the cops whenever they are being loud now. I don't care how many times these cops have to respond. If they are not going to do anything, they are going to have to suffer the same issues as me then. The fun part is that for the past 6 months, Olga has been attempting to raise a MJ plant. It is healthy, not that big yet, but it is getting there. Anyways, I bought a nice bottle of concentrated liquid fertilizer, took a 3 ml syringe and filled it up and then injected it straight into the base of the plant. Now to watch it do really well for a day or two and then suddenly shrivel up and die, just like their hopes and dreams. And yeah guys, now we have reached the end of the video, but I just wanted to quickly mention, I am currently working on setting up a podcast, aka bringing the episodes from YouTube on podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts and so on. If you are interested in that, please let me know in the comments because I think there are quite a lot of people that would appreciate this. Anyway, thanks for watching, I hope to see you again tomorrow.